Good evening, everybody. Well, early evening, that is, for the True Blue podcast. We're back this week for episode 4. It's brought to you by Mid-Canada Fasteners and Tools, your one-stop shop for all your industrial needs. Be sure to check out their store locations today in Brandon and Winnipeg, and also check out their website at midcanadafasteners.shop. We're also brought to you by Terrico, serving Manitoba producers in the agricultural industry for over 80 years. Be sure to check out their website at gshow.ca. And also, we got a new sponsor here to the G Show Productions brand, the Service Call Goaltenders, your goalie's personal video review service. It's a service created by Gordie Tummelson, goalie coach of Pilot Mountain Hockey Academy. Be sure to visit his website and see what he has to offer at GordieTummelsonGoalies.ca. But yeah, the True Blue podcast for episode 4, presented by all these brands. I'm glad to be back here on this Friday. Decided to drop it a bit earlier than 9 p.m. since the Bombers take on the Toronto Argonauts tonight at IG Field at 7 p.m. Central Time. It's going to be a big one, even though Toronto is not starting all their guys. Buckshot, gotta give him credit, man. He kept calling this for 2 episodes. I didn't think it was going to happen with the Argonauts sitting notable starters like a Chad Kelly. As you'll come to hear, the guest has some more news in terms of who's going to be sitting out in this week's upcoming matchup between the Blue and Gold and the Toronto Argonauts. But we're also going to have a tailgating segment to end off this edition of the show. We got a great guest that's joining us today. Only one guest in this edition of the show. But before we get into anything else, I also want to let you guys know that we now have our official G Show Productions website. It has launched at gshow.ca. It's super high speed, professional looking. It's everything you could ever ask for in a website. And yeah, shout out to Dave McDonald and his team over at Air Whistle Media for hooking it up and making it happen. But yeah, big week 17 between the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and Toronto Argonauts. Bigger for the Bombers this week coming up, as they got a lot more to play for in this regular season than the Argonauts do, as they already got first place locked up in the East. I had a chance to talk to Darrin, Bauming, creator of Bonfire Sports Winnipeg, earlier today in the afternoon to get his thoughts on the Argonauts sitting Chad Kelly. We also talk about the Bombers bye week coming off that, and in terms of what to expect from the Bombers, what their week of prep has looked like this week heading into this big Grey Cup rematch against the Argonauts at IG Field. It's a sellout tonight too, should be a fantastic game, and me and Darrin also get into the keys to the game for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers going up against Toronto this week. In week 17 for episode 4 here on this Friday night. Last time this podcast will be airing in September for the year of 2023 on G Show Productions with myself, Graham, the G Show Forsyth. Enjoy this pre-recorded segment coming up with Darrin Bauming to start things off. And it's Darrin Bauming joining this edition of the True Blue podcast for this week's edition of the show. We're airing it a bit earlier because the Bombers playing at 7 p.m. on this Friday night. He's the creator of Bonfire Sports Winnipeg. It's great to have you here, Darrin. How has your week been? Busy getting ready to cover the Bombers. I know the podcast for you aired yesterday. How have things been?
Yeah, very busy. This is the time of year sports fans, I think, enjoy the most, with Canadian football really heating up, the National Football League underway, and then, of course, Jets hockey and the National Hockey League, and, people getting their fantasy pools together and all those sorts of things, looking forward to the regular season. So Jets training camp, some of those preseason games at Canada Life Center. A big Bombers game, unfortunately, maybe not the marquee matchup truly that we were all hoping for, but yeah, lots going on.
Yeah, and you kind of got to question, I've said it before, question the CFL in terms of putting the matchup this week instead of earlier on in the season when these are two of the top teams or among the top teams in the league heading into the season. And we've seen that unfold throughout the course of the 16 weeks so far this year. But yeah, the big news is Chad Kelly is resting, that he might play some snaps in this game, but it's Cameron Dukes that's getting the start. I know that Ryan Dinwiddie came out and said the reason they're resting him is because of the D line from the Bombers and the crowd noise. Your thoughts on Dinwiddie and their staff on sitting Kelly with them already having first place clinched in the East?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I feel for the fans. I'm a fan of the game myself, not a fan of any of the teams in particular, but you want to see best versus best. You want to see a Grey Cup rematch and a third straight sellout at IG Field, the Madhouse on Matheson, as I like to refer to it. It's going to be rocking, but, we were looking forward to Zach Collaros versus Chad Kelly, Brady Oliveira versus AJ Olette, and we will see that. But to not see that quarterback matchup is disappointing. You mentioned the schedule, and everybody's talking about that right now. Like, why a Grey Cup rematch took this long to have, and only to see them meet once this season, week 17 in a 21-week season, and being the only meeting is kind of disappointing. That all said, it makes sense. This makes perfect football sense for the Toronto Argonauts. They have the East Division locked up. That leads into the conversation, of course, about division alignment or whether there should even be divisions at all in a 9-team CFL. But those things aside, when it comes to the Argos, having the East Division locked up, they will have a bye in the first round of the playoffs. They had all three of their regular season byes pretty much in the first half of the season. So, Winton McManus out, a handful of other guys on the injured list. Andrew Harris, unfortunately, placed on the 6th game last week, won't suit up against his former team in his hometown, but is in Winnipeg. It goes obviously beyond resting Chad Kelly. And when Ryan Dinwiddie came out and said, well, it's the D line, it's the loud environment, that sort of thing, people kind of immediately thought, well, is Ryan Dinwiddie, a former quarterback himself, protecting Chad Kelly? Is he, um, putting what's the term I'm looking for? Like, he's putting an umbrella,
Yeah,
he's sheltering him. Is he
right, right.
sheltering Chad Kelly from a very tough place to play and a team that is going to be fired up to, to smack him in the mouth, to play hard-nosed football and get a little bit of long overdue redemption from a Grey Cup loss for Winnipeg that was at the hands of Chad Kelly in the fourth quarter. So as much as he said the D line and the environmental and all of that, I don't think Ryan Dinwiddie in his heart of hearts is sheltering Chad Kelly. I honestly believe that if this game was in BC or this game was in Montreal, it could very well be a similar situation. Chad Kelly will dress. Maybe he'll play. Maybe he'll play a little bit. But next week is the 150th anniversary game for the Toronto Argonauts at home. They have 4 game weeks following this week. So it is more so, to me, an opportunity to rest now and then be able to be healthy and rested and ramp up to the postseason in those final 4 games of the regular season for the Toronto Argonauts. So, for Chad Kelly, maybe it's almost good for him to watch from afar, get that perspective, have that coach in his headset, while being on the sidelines, to, gain a little bit of perspective on this Blue Bombers defense in 2023. That might serve them not just well, but serve them the best in the postseason if these two teams meet in the Grey Cup.
Yeah, and my thinking heading into it before this news broke is no way they're going to sit, their starters for this game, knowing it's the Grey Cup rematch, knowing there's 4 games left in the season. But the more, I think about it, the more it does make sense at the end of the day. They already got first place locked up, even though they're going to get a bye. first week of the playoffs. They already have had all three of their buys. So it's interesting that Ryan Dinwiddie, deciding to rest Chad Kelly in this game. Maybe he will play, like you said, he will be dressing for this game. I just feel like, with a game of this magnitude, I think it is more so on how it's scheduled, where it's scheduled. But 4 games left in the season after this week, I feel like you could have maybe potentially sat him more so in those games heading forward with the, magnifications of this game coming up against the Bombers. It's going to be huge because it's a sellout game. It's the Grey Cup rematch. But at the end of the day, yeah, it does make sense to end up resting your star QB, keeping him healthy, heading into the playoffs, heading in where the goal for the Argos obviously is to go in and repeat as Grey Cup champs. But talking about the sellout, of course, third straight sellout, like you said, at IG Field, should serve the Bombers well playing with this energy, I'd have to think. But what has been the week of preparation been like for the Bombers coming out of the bye week, going into this Grey Cup rematch against the Argos, even though they're not going to be at their full strength throughout the game in terms of their full starters playing?
Yeah. Well, it's coming off a bye. I think for Winnipeg, believe it or not, this team has lost 2 of their last 3 games, right? The overtime loss in the Labor Day Classic, blowing out the Rough Riders, being the victory in the Banjo Bowl, and then losing 29-23 to the Hamilton Tiger Cats 2 weeks ago. Coming out of the bye, I think, no matter who's playing for Toronto, I think Winnipeg is going to want to put on a show for their fans. Just 2 home games remaining in the regular season. They will host a playoff game at some point, as we know now, whether it's the West Final or the West Semifinal, depending on how things shake out with BC. Now everything shifts to that next game in Vancouver as kind of the marquee matchup for the Blue Bombers on the home stretch here. But all things considered, and relatively speaking, the Bombers are healthy, and to get Jackson Jeffcoat back after missing a game, I don't think it's anything too serious with him. Maybe he even could have played against Hamilton, but to give him that game off and then a bye week, now to see him healthy, they need him in the home stretch. It's pretty crazy, Graham, when you look at the Bombers with Jackson Jeffcoat in the lineup. It's like they're a different defense. He really brings something, whether that's taking attention away from Willie Jefferson or just what he's able to do himself. Such a tenacious, never quit player that really brings it. And then Teadric Hansen, 13 months after suffering torn Achilles in the Labor Day Classic last season, back in the lineup. And I know Bomber fans, first and foremost, looking at the special teams as maybe the pardon the on-the-nose pun here, the Achilles heel of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Getting Teadric Hansen back on cover teams and on those on the return teams blocking is huge for Winnipeg. So is it going to solve everything? No, but it'll definitely help bolster that crew, and hopefully they can figure things out here before the postseason.
Yeah, and I said it on last week's show when I had Taylor Allen on, is I felt like Jackson Jeffcoat being out of the lineup, exactly what you said. They're a different team when he's in that lineup. Even though the Bombers had the 3 sacks against Hamilton, it seemed like there was some jump missing from that D line. And, we've seen the benefits of when Jackson Jeffcoat has been in and how much energy he brings to the table. I think that that's huge for us to get the special teams more healthy again heading in, or the Bombers, that is, to get the special teams more healthy heading in, because it's been inconsistent and lacking at points in terms of a standard we're used to seeing with this Bombers team in past years. The field goal kicking has been better this year, but the return game has been quite a mess in the past little while. So yeah, that's huge for sure. And I think that bye week with the Bombers having a week to sit on it, coming at home where they haven't lost yet this season, knock on wood, hopefully it does not happen tonight, but this is a huge game heading in for the Blue and Gold, especially like you said, going up against BC, where it could determine the West heading in after that matchup. And with this game being at home with a third straight sellout, I think that it's going to be a game where the Bombers, I'd hope that they come out with a lot of jump and a lot of firepower, something that we haven't always seen this season, where they've kind of stumbled out of the gates.
Yep, they've been very good at home. Just kind of beyond that first loss to the BC Lions in week 3, they've been outstanding at home. And it was interesting watching the lines, the Vegas lines on this game. Whether you're a gambler or not, it's almost irrelevant. If you watch those lines, it tells you a lot about what you can expect to see in that game. It's so indicative so often, not always, but often. And to see the Bombers as a 3.5-point favorite, and then the news about Chad Kelly not starting, and that line moving 4 points to a 7.5-point favorite for Winnipeg, I think just speaks to how well they play at home, how confident the world is about the Winnipeg Blue Bombers playing at IG Field. And I think, it just means more to Winnipeg because they're at home, because it's a sellout game, and because they are contending with the BC Lions for first in the West Division. Don't think for a second the Bombers want to, cruise into the postseason. And well, if BC, captures first place, so be it. They'll find a way to get to the Grey Cup. They want that home playoff game to be the West Final, because the path to the Grey Cup is so much easier when you're playing, all of your playoff games at home compared to a West final or a West semifinal and then having to go to a West final on the road. Always tricky to do. But Winnipeg has had good success on the field in Hamilton, not in the regular season where they've kind of been kind of bad, but very good success in the Grey Cup, and in the playoffs playing in Hamilton. So we look towards the 110th, later in November.
Yeah, and this season compared to the past 2 seasons, it's a lot tighter in the West, and the Bombers compared to playing at home to on the road, I feel like getting that home field advantage means that much more. So yeah, these are huge 2 weeks coming up for the Bombers, probably their biggest 2 weeks of this regular season, of the season as a whole at this point before playoffs hits, of course. But yeah, the West being as tight as it is this year, the Bombers looking to come out strong tonight. You'd have to think against the best team in the East, a team that's only lost once in the Toronto Argonauts. Like you said, the Bombers relatively healthy heading into this game. What would you say the keys to the game are tonight for this blue and gold team going up against the 12-1 Toronto Argonauts in Week 17 at IG Field?
Yeah, well, my good friend and broadcast partner, Chris Walby, he's forgotten more football than I'll ever know. So I'll kind of piggyback on his keys to the game that, he gave on our pregame show on Bonfire. But number one, and I think it's first and foremost for sure, is to limit AJ Ouellette, a tailback that has shown just a real ability to play that physical brand, has been explosive, has been consistent, and just kind of plays, a throwback style of game. Chris Walby mentioned he reminded him of John Riggins playing for Washington, the big body fullback of years gone by. Seeing him against Brady Oliveira, both two physical runners, is going to be a lot of fun. But the Argos have a tailback by committee, even with Andrew Harris out of the lineup. They give you different looks, they do different things, and if for my money, the Toronto Argonauts offensive line is the number one O-line in the Canadian Football League, hands down. They have just been so good, even with, injuries coming in, whoever's stepped in, they've kept up that high standard. It's a big reason why Chad Kelly has been as efficient and effective as he has been this season, throwing the football and running the football as well. I think for Winnipeg, it's to not allow Javon Leake to get dangerous, right? He has been so good. He is, I tweeted it earlier this week, Graham, that he is my clubhouse leader. Somebody's going to have to do something crazy good in this final stretch of the season to get my vote in the CFL awards. Javon Leake, for my money, is the best special teams player in the CFL today. Physical and fast, the way he's able to find seams and really explode through them while also, being able to break tackles and play physical in the return game. Unique, special combination. Winnipeg, as you mentioned, has not been very good on cover teams or return teams. So not allowing Toronto to get something happen on special teams, to get that game-breaking, momentum-shifting play on special teams. I think that is a huge key and probably the most important. Almost a 1A and 1B, I would say, with limiting AJ Ouellette. But Javon Leake scares me a lot more than Winnipeg's run defense against Ouellette.
Yeah, for sure. And Leak has been fantastic this season. Like you said, in your opinion, the clubhouse leader for the special teams award this season. It'll be interesting to see what happens there, who it goes to, who gets nominated. But I think the big thing on offense for the Bombers, and we've seen how good they are when they get this guy going, is you got to get the run game going with Brady Oliveira. Only 9 carries from him in that game against Hamilton. Couldn't get him established for whatever reason. I know the Bombers were down, to start off that game, but you got to get him going because he's the staple of this offense at the end of the day. He allows for Zach Collaros to have the pressure let off of him. Also, I'd like to see Oliveira getting involved more in the passing game because he's turned into more than just a power back. He's turned into an all-purpose type of running back this season, as we've seen unfold in front of our own eyes. And for Zach Collaros, I mean, I've praised him so much. I keep saying it on this show, but he's got to limit the turnovers. We've seen Zach Collaros make some bad decisions recently, especially ever since coming off of that neck injury he suffered against the Edmonton Elks. He's got to trust around the talent that he has. He can make the big throws, but don't force it if it isn't there. You got to feed off the crowd, get off to a hot start, and have Toronto play behind the 8 ball to start off this game, put the pressure on Dukes. It's going to be interesting what the Bombers cook up to get pressure, find ways to break through that O-line. But if you can make him uncomfortable, a guy that doesn't really have any experience starting in the CFL, force some mistakes, feed off of that energy that Jackson Jeffcoat brings, that would be huge for the Bombers in this game. And then special teams, whether it's defending or going on the offensive on the special teams, it hasn't been that great from the Bombers as the season has gone along. You got to have Castillo making the kicks when he needs to. The return game needs to be way better. And of course, cover teams needs to be way better in this game going up against a dangerous, explosive returner in Leak. So those are my keys to the game against the Bombers. You can't start off slow in this game, even though Chad Kelly isn't starting. We don't know what Dukes is going to bring, but first and foremost, I think on offense, Zach Collaros has to take care of the ball, and you got to get Brady Oliveira going because he has been outstanding this season for the Blue and Gold.
Yeah, well said by you. 2 thoughts that I'll kind of piggyback on you there. Number one, I think Brady Oliveira, we're seeing the emergence of a true star in the CFL. And I'm not saying, amongst the best players. I mean, like legit star, somebody who is in that MOP conversation. Pretty special to see that happening in his hometown for his hometown team and all of that. For Zach Collaros, Graham, don't you agree that it's like the gift and the curse? When Collaros took over this offense during that 2019 Grey Cup run, it was the threat of a legitimate pass threat that opened everything up for Andrew Harris and the entire offense. It's the gift and the curse. Collaros is not afraid to throw the football. He is not afraid to throw it into small windows, be aggressive. The gift being the special things he's able to do. Dalton Schoen, Kenny Lawler, Nick Dembski, all of the guys, and finding ways to score touchdowns. The curse, of course, being because he is not afraid to be aggressive and make those dangerous throws, sometimes he'll throw some picks. What is most, I think, important is when he does have those multi-interception games like he's had a couple times this year, the Bombers still find a way to win.
Yep.
So if you can do that and be aggressive and have that dangerous pass threat to go with, for my money, the best running back in the CFL in Brady Oliveira, don't mess with success. Absolutely limit the turnovers. But I don't think anybody in that Blue Bombers organization wants Collaros to change the way he plays. He doesn't want to throw the picks, but I think they're going to happen.
Oh, for sure. He's about taking the big shots, and this Bombers team is so complete that they've been able to get away with it. But I just feel like in these next 2 weeks, especially when you're going up against quality opponents, they
Yeah.
smoked BC last time. This Toronto Argonauts team, even though not all their starters are playing, they're still going to be there. You got to trust in what's there instead of taking the big shots all the time. Not saying that he limits
Right.
those entirely, but got to definitely be smarter and ease up a bit on the interceptions because it's been hard to watch sometimes as a Winnipeg Blue Bombers fan for certain. But I still got Zach Claris as the best QB in the league. He is that
Great.
talented. He's a magician in the pocket, and just got to trust that he's going to find a way to get it done in the end.
Yeah. Let's remember it was this Argos defense that picked Vernon Adams Jr. off 6 times in
Yeah.
one game. So hopefully we don't see any something similar to that on Friday night, right?
Yeah, I'm crossing my fingers here, Darrin, hoping that the 6 turnovers doesn't happen from Zach Claris or in total from this Bombers team. It was a lot of fun having you on, Darrin. Bauming of the Bonfire Sports Company is the creator here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Darrin, let's do this again sometime. This was a lot of fun.
Would be glad to. Thanks for having me, Graham.
Of course, Darrin, you take care. That was Darrin Bauming of Bonfire Sports joining this edition of the True Blue Podcast for episode 4, the official Blue Bombers podcast here on G-Show Productions. Man, I gotta get a haircut. It's annoying, these long walks at points. But yeah, the True Blue Podcast brought to you by Mid-Canada Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltenders. Thank you to them for their support of G-Show Productions. And yeah, good on Darrin for saying that the Bombers lost to the BC Lions in Winnipeg, because I had forgotten, honestly, that game was in Winnipeg. So the Bombers not perfect at home, like I said. That was an error on me. But going back to Chad Kelly, there could be points in this game where he plays, depending on how Ryan Dinwiddie wants to play it. But yeah, I feel like what he said in terms of the D-line and the atmosphere, like those are 2 valid points. And maybe he was just saying it to say it to give a good answer. But yeah, I just, with 4 games left in the season, I get it. Like, I'm gonna double back on this right now. Like, with 4 games left in the season after this one for the Argonauts, you have a bye first week of the playoffs. Sure, this Bombers defense, out of the teams they are facing remaining, like, this Bombers defense is the best defense out of those teams. But, like, for Chad Kelly, he's only played the Bombers once, and that was coming into the Grey Cup in relief of McLeod Bethel Thompson after he went down with an injury, sitting him for this game. And yes, at the end of the day, it is on the schedulers for putting this game in so late in the season. Yes, the Argos are the best team in the CFL, and they can do what they want at the end of the day. And it is good to get your backups reps in case something happens to a starter like Chad Kelly. If he goes down, Cameron Dukes, he's got to be able to take over. But I think sitting him throughout most of the game is kind of pathetic because of the significance of this game, it being a Grey Cup rematch. And yeah, like Darrin said, you can learn a lot from being on the sidelines and watching, and you can learn from film, but you can learn more, in my opinion, from playing and actually facing this Bombers defense, which is one of the best in the league. And you can watch the film afterwards. You can also get hurt at any time. As good as this Bombers defense is, like, you could get hurt after this game in terms of the pressure that the other teams are playing. And this season, aside from the BC Lions, and this is no slight on the Montreal Alouettes and teams like the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who they've gotten better as the season has gone along, he hasn't really faced a defense like this. So I just feel like for Chad Kelly, if he was to face a defense like this, he has experience like that already for the Argonauts if they were to match up with the Bombers in the Grey Cup. Again, I feel like you can learn so much more from actually playing a full game, maybe not a full game, but most of it. And then, hey, you know what? You could substitute him out if you want to rest him or not. I just feel like not playing him isn't the smartest thing, in my opinion. And yeah, there could be injuries. You don't want Chad Kelly to go down. But like I said, injuries can happen at any point. It could happen after this game. If Chad Kelly were to get hurt against one of those other teams that aren't the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So, interesting from Ryan Dinwiddie. I mean, his comments, I feel like it is respect to the Bombers in terms of the crowd noise that the crowd brings at IG Field, who I think are the best fans in the league. I know there might be some bias there, but 3 sellouts in a row, like Darrin Bauming said, that's big time. And yeah, this D-line, that's respect to them from the comments there that Dinwiddie made. But I just feel like sitting him for most of the game or maybe the entire game, you want to have your QB, your number one starter, go against the best. And it's a shame that we won't entirely see that in this week 17 matchup coming up. But that should have the Bombers as the favorites, as they are favored to win, like Darrin said, 7.5 point favorites heading into this week 17 matchup with this playing a factor. It's going to be interesting to see how Cameron Dukes plays. I have not heard of this guy until it was announced he's starting this week, so should be interesting. Bombers going up against, like Darrin said, maybe the best O-line in the CFL, in his opinion, the best O-line in the CFL. But in terms of the score, in terms of the prediction, I am going to call the Bombers to win this game by a score of, and I've been wrong on score predictions so many times this year on this podcast. I haven't gotten one right out of the 2 so far that I've made, but I'm going to go with a 36 to, not 36 actually, I'm going to go with a 33-16 win for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in this one over the Toronto Argonauts. I think they're going to come out and make a statement. I think the big thing is they got to come out strong, which I think the Bombers will in tonight's matchup. And I think that they'll put themselves in a position in the fourth quarter where they could do what they do best and control the game, control the ball, and really close it out with a solid running game in Brady Oliveira. And I think the defense is going to lock down and do their thing. But the Bombers can't beat themselves tonight, even with Chad Kelly out. This Toronto Argonauts team, much like the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, is so good in so many facets outside of their QB, and AJ Ouellette is playing in this game an absolute stud in the backfield for the Toronto Argonauts. I don't think quite on the level as Brady Oliveira is playing at this season, but pretty darn good at that. So yeah, that's my predictions for this game. Of course, no highlights to show you guys this week since the Bombers did not play last week, coming off of a bye week. They'll have their next bye week after next week's game in week 18 against the BC Lions, where that's going to be a huge one, as we'll be talking about that, previewing that in next week's show on episode 5 of the True Blue podcast. But in terms of tonight's matchups, there's a doubleheader tonight and a doubleheader tomorrow after the Bombers and Argonauts play. Well, the game might not even be over yet at this point, but the BC Lions are at home to take on the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and this is big time for these two teams this week coming up, as if the Bombers end up losing and BC ends up winning, BC overtakes Winnipeg for first place in the West, and that game next week, as important as it is already for the Bombers, becomes even that much more important because the season series is going to be on the line, and the Bombers could fall 2 games back if they were to lose 2 in a row. Fingers crossed that does not happen. But in terms of tomorrow in the CFL, another doubleheader, like I said, the Ottawa Red Blacks at home to take on the Montreal Alouettes at 3 p.m. Central Time, and then to end things off for Week 17 in the CFL, the Hamilton Tiger Cats at home against the Calgary Stampeders. Calgary is still fighting for their playoff lives, I guess, with Saskatchewan. If they continue to lose, they're not the favorites heading into tonight against BC. I think BC probably takes that game. Calgary at 4-10, they got to win out to give themselves a really good chance. And for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, they are looking to further secure their place and third place for the East Division and not allowing a crossover. The Edmonton Elks get the bye this week. They'll be back in action next week to take on the Toronto Argonauts. So, we're going to take a transition here, folks, and then I'll be back for this week's edition of the tailgating segment. It hasn't been done since the first week of the season. I know I've been lacking on that. It's something I promised, but haven't been able to find the time. And as you know, there's a reason why I haven't been barbecuing, so you'll hear that first off. But in that segment coming up, which is pre-recorded to end off this show. I hope you guys enjoy it because this week coming up, making something that is one of my favorite meals, and I'm sure a lot of people love this food too. So stay tuned for that coming up, of course. Let's get into it right now on episode 4 of the True Blue podcast with our tailgating segment coming up next. It's this week's edition of the Tailgate segment on the True Blue podcast. Haven't done this since episode 1. As you can see here, I'm holding some tortilla chips. They're multi-grain rounds, Tostitos. Going to see if I have some more here, but I'm going to be making nachos for this week's episode. I honestly don't know how to use a barbecue. Thought it might be unsafe if I tried to just do it without knowing what I'm doing. So might have to get some coaching from my dad on that one in terms of how to use it. And I know 22 years old don't know how to use a barbecue, kind of pathetic. But what we're going to be doing is keeping it simple. We're going to be using chips as well as some grated cheese that I've grated up already. And some tomatoes for this one. We're kind of lacking in ingredients over here at the Forsyth household, but we're going to make it work. The big thing you want to do here if you're cooking in an oven for this, which I'm doing, is you're going to want to set it to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're going to cut to me cutting up some tomatoes now. Alright, so the oven just went off. It's ready to go. I just need to cut up these tomatoes here. You guys can use any type of tomatoes, really. I'm using these baby tomatoes. They look kind of bigger than usual ones, but always wash your food, especially, vegetables and anything you're using to cook like that. But what we're going to do is just simply dice them here, like this. You don't want too big of chunks because that'll be no fun when you eat them like that. But as we get the rest of these cut, we'll cut to dressing up the nachos. Alright, so it's time to dress up the nachos now. I also found some other chips to use, but there's not much here. We just want to dump all of that on. And take this, which is still Tostitos brand, a hint of spicy queso. These aren't too bad, I quite enjoy these. Put about that much on. So sometimes I like my nachos, a lot of times actually I like them with, some sort of meat, whether that's chicken or steak. But we don't have that. It's going to be all vegetarian today. I was hoping we had black olives, but sadly mistaken on that. And what you're going to do here with your cheese is you're just going to sprinkle it on. Will be the next step. I usually like a lot of cheese on my nachos. This isn't like a ton, in my opinion, but I want to try to cover every little inch of it. Don't have enough cheese to do that, which is okay. Some of these won't be fully dressed up. But then you're going to take your tomatoes. Could dice them a bit smaller, but I'm good with this type of size right these dimensions, I should say. And yeah, leave in the comments below, folks, what your favorite tailgating meal is. I know this isn't the traditional way to tailgate. You usually get outside in a parking lot to do this. Last time we were cooking on the fireplace, but here we are. Here's how these nachos are dressed up. You can judge if you want, but you know, I'm not picky in terms of how they look. So now what you're gonna do is you're going to put them into the oven. Oven beeped long ago. But you're gonna put them into the oven, and you're gonna want to cook these at about, let's see here, hit the timer. Set it for 10 minutes and then check up on them, see if they need some more cooking. About 5 minutes added on is the rule of thumb, is what my mom taught me. So we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Yeah, these look really good. We will leave them in, well, I'll leave them in for about another 5 minutes, just under that. Alright, so the oven beeps, and oh yeah, these are cooked. Now what you're always going to want to do is, you don't want to burn yourself, of course. I feel like this is common sense. But you want to grab the oven mitt, or an oven mitt you have. Just look at that. I mean, like, not 5-star or anything. I don't even know if it's close to that, but hey, these look appetizing to me. Next thing you're going to want to do to serve these is grab a plate, a spatula, using a metal one, and you're just going to want to grab the oven mitt too, so we can get a firm grip here to stir these up. Just plop them right on the plate. It's not about being fancy here on G-Show Productions when it comes to cooking. Maybe in the future when my skills might improve. But yeah, there basically is what you got, is this nice looking plate of nachos. Like I said, not bad dressed up, so we're gonna hit it with some onion and whiskey barbecue sauce. One of my favorite things to put on nachos, especially when there's not much to cook with. But just want to drizzle it on like so. Yeah, you're also going to want to hit it with some sour cream as well. I already put it in this bowl. Maybe you want to put it on your nachos, or maybe you want to have it separate like me in a bowl so you can dip. But yeah, excited to eat these. I think they look pretty good. I mean, as good as I am capable as making nachos, that is. I'm not a 5-star chef or anything like that. It's just myself, Graham, the G-Show Foresight, of course. But already gave the game prediction for this game between the Bombers and the Argonauts before we went to this tailgating segment. I got the Bombers winning. Who do you guys got winning in this game this week for the big Week 17 matchup between the Blue and Gold and the Toronto Argonauts? Let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, that's going to do it for this edition of the True Blue Podcast for episode 4. I've been your host, Graham, the G-Show Foresight. Thank you to Darrin Bauming for for joining the show as a guest this week, the one and only guest of Bonfire Sports. He's the creator of that company here in Winnipeg, so be sure to check out his work. You could search him up on the internet, on Google, whatever search browser you use, and you'd be able to find him. Also, special thanks to you, the viewer, for tuning in to this episode. We'll be back next Friday for another edition of the True Blue Podcast. Probably gonna come and do an episode at 9, come back on Friday and do an episode at 9 next week, so stay tuned for that. We'll have the update for the time on our social media pages linked in the description. Not linked in the description, but our handles are in the description of this episode. We also have a new website, gshow.ca, that is officially live. All our content will be going through there with embedded links and whatnot. And yeah, you'll be able to check out any piece of the content that G-Show Productions puts out through there. Special thanks to our sponsors in Make Canada Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltenders for sponsoring this edition of the True Blue Podcast, the official Winnipeg Blue Bombers podcast of G-Show Productions. But I'm going to let you guys go now. Enjoy the game tonight, everybody. Enjoy whatever you're planning on making before the game. I'm going to go enjoy these nachos now. Until next Friday, it's Graham and G-Show Forsyth giving you the salute, peacing out, and saying so long on this Friday. Enjoy the game.